Hey bro, so as a Christian, you really believe that everything that we see right now was created by God?
Yes, of course.
But you just have faith, you don't have any evidence.
Well, actually, life itself is evidence for God's existence.
What do you mean?
So as an atheist, how would you say life came to be?
Well, that's an easy one. According to the famous scientist and atheist Richard Dawkins, he said that life came from an alien. If you don't believe me, watch this video yourself.
Well, then who did create the heavens and the earth?
Why do you use the word who? You see, you immediately beg the question by using the word who.
Well, then how did it get created?
Well, by a very slow process.
Well, how did it start?
Nobody knows how it started. We know the kind of event that it must have been. We know the sort of event that must have happened for the origin of life.
And what was that?
It was the origin of the first self-replicating molecule.
Right, and how did that happen?
I told you we don't know.
So you have no idea how it started?
No, nor has anybody.
Nor has anyone else. What do you think is the possibility that intelligent design might turn out to be the answer to some issues in genetics or in evolution?
It could come about in the following way. It could be that at some earlier time, somewhere in the universe, a civilization evolved by probably some kind of Darwinian means to a very, very high level of technology and designed a form of life that they seeded onto perhaps this planet. Now, that is a possibility and an intriguing possibility. And I suppose it's possible that you might find evidence for that if you look at the details of biochemistry, molecular biology. You might find a signature of some sort of designer.
Wait a second. Richard Dawkins thought intelligent design might be a legitimate pursuit?
And that designer could well be a higher intelligence.
When you're saying that life on Earth came from aliens, you're just shifting the question. So now I want to ask you, where did the aliens' life come from?
Well, that's an easier question. Probably just from another alien.
And where did that alien get his life from? Okay, let's just move on. So how do you believe everything was created?
The Big Bang, of course.
So what was there before the Big Bang?
Absolutely nothing.
Really? So how did nothing create everything?
I don't think I should explain it, so let me show you a video of Richard Dawkins explaining it.
It's a matter,
you can quickly respond to that.
You can dispute exactly what's meant by nothing, but whatever it is, it's very, very simple. And why is that funny?
Well, I think it's a bit funny to be trying to define nothing.
So this really makes sense to you?
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
So as you are a creationist, that means that you reject or ignore everything science knows about evolution and other things and pretend instead that everything was just poofed out of nothing by an incantation spoken by a magic invisible man?
Yes, of course.
What do you mean, of course? That would imply that there was some reason to believe that you had some evidence to go on, but there's no evidence to imply anything like that.
Well, actually, life itself is evidence for God's existence.
No, that's the question-begging fallacy, where you simply assume your conclusions at the onset and don't even consider the alternatives or the reality. It's also a fallacy of false dichotomy, the very first foundational falsehood of creationism, since many of the pioneers and champions of evolution were or still are Christians. They're just not dogmatic religious extremist fundamentalists who worship man-made mythology because they can't distinguish doctrine from deity. That would be your problem. A logical fallacy is an argument or position that is not logically valid, meaning that it is not logical to assume what you did. Circular reasoning is not evidence of itself, the way you make it out to be, nor are the claims made in the Bible evidence that the claims made in the Bible are correct. Again, that would be circular. That's the question-begging fallacy. Logical fallacies are not evidence. Evidence is a body of objectively verifiable facts that are positively indicative of and or exclusively concordant with one position or hypothesis over any other. You don't have that, neither for creation nor God. because life itself would still be here exactly the way it is, even in a purely materialist model in which there is no God. In either case, if the same fact would still be true in either of two mutually exclusive hypotheses, then that fact is not evidence of either one. A fact does not become evidence until it indicates one or eliminates the other, and there has never been one single fact that indicates either God or creation.
So as an atheist, how would you say life came to be?
Well, we haven't worked out all the details yet, but what we know so far of the early Earth is that it was warmer and more radioactive than it is today, a bubbling cauldron cooking complex chemicals. And thanks to Uri Miller and a number of other similar experiments, we know that water, ammonia, methane, and hydrogen generate amino acids when heated and charged with electricity. The same thing happens when you change the mix to include carbon dioxide, nitrogen, hydrogen sulfide, and sulfur dioxide. Similarly, heating the water to 70 degrees Celsius in the presence of iron hydroxide, simulating geothermal vents in the anaerobic conditions of the prebiotic Earth, also produced amino acids and alpha hydroxy acids in the lab. A separate study showed that redox and pH gradients drive amino acid synthesis in iron oxyhydroxide mineral systems. Alanine and valine, two of the proteinogenic amino acids thought to be among the most abundant in the prebiotic Earth, can polymerize into peptides. Further studies show that it is remarkably easy for peptides to subsequently assemble into ordered protein-like two-dimensional structures, amyloids, from basic building blocks. And this discovery supports the researchers' hypotheses that primal life could have evolved from amyloids such as these because peptides can spontaneously form self-replicating protein structures in the presence of carbonyl sulfide. They can also dry into polypeptides because some of these chemicals become increasingly complex after repeated cycles of inundation, dehydration, and irradiation. Then, if the right phosphate is involved, they become ribonucleotides. If ribonucleotides come into contact with montmorillonite, they spontaneously produce strands of RNA. Activated RNA can not only replicate itself even without the usual enzyme, it also builds DNA. And biochemists now know of a ribozyme that can use either left or right-handed RNA templates to exclusively synthesize right-handed versions, solving the problem of homochirality. Then, of course, phospholipids automatically form into a bilayered cell wall upon contact with water due to their combined polarity, allowing a haven for all of these processes with transport vesicles and other semi-permeable channels to keep fueling and exchanging the system. So, if RNA and DNA were already contained within that incidental arrangement, then we have the basis of the first living cells. We don't even need to talk about panspermia, which is the idea that the first organisms were seeded here on meteorites or what have you, because we already know that the early Earth could produce all of that on its own, even without any sort of alien influence.
When you're saying that life on Earth came from aliens, you're just shifting the question. So now I want to ask you, where did the aliens' life come from?
There don't have to be any aliens involved. I know the pseudoscience propagandist Ben Stein published a deceptively edited interview with him and Richard Dawkins, wherein he claimed that Dawkins believed something that Dawkins clearly did not believe, because creationism depends on misunderstood, misrepresented misinformation, and misdirected misquotation is their hallmark. Ben Stein asked Richard Dawkins to describe a hypothetical situation in which evidence points to an intelligent designer. Dawkins could have refused the question. He could have said that evidence doesn't point to an intelligent designer, but I guess he was feeling generous, and maybe he mistook Stein for an intelligent or for an honest person who cared what the truth is and wants to understand it, neither of which Stein did. So Dawkins obliged and explained that even in this hypothetical alternative reality, which is not the reality we live in, the only way intelligent design could be possible is if it was extraterrestrial, having evolved on some other planet and then seeding life on this one, which, as I already said, was never necessary, and Dawkins fully understands that.
And where did that alien get his life from?
There don't need to be any aliens involved, and there evidently weren't any aliens involved. If there were, that would have been the only evidence of intelligent design, but there is no evidence of intelligent design. There is no evidence of aliens or God. And living things don't get their life from somewhere else either. It's not a gift. It's not like there's a well of souls waiting to use bodies as a vehicle or that sort of thing. We are our bodies. There's no such thing as a soul. Life, like consciousness, is an emergent aspect of biochemical processes.
Okay, let's just move on. So, how do you believe everything was created?
I don't believe everything was created. Everything was not created. Material energy, at least, is in some sense eternal, even in models of Big Bang cosmology.
So what was there before the Big Bang?
Nothing. Nothing can happen before time began, because any occurrence would require a passage of time. It's like asking what's south of the South Pole. Even if there was something, the singularity, if you will, it would have been in complete stasis, a non-event mass with a quantum probability of 0 for all eternity, until some as yet unknown catalyst caused an arc to form in an asymptote on the fourth axis of our Cartesian coordinate system, the one labeled T for time. We don't yet know what that catalyst was, and we might never find out, but we do know that it evidently wasn't any God, and it certainly wasn't the Bible God.
Really? So how did nothing create everything?
It didn't. Nothing was ever created. I don't mean something created nothing. I mean everything was not created at all. Just because it didn't come from a God doesn't mean that it came from nothing. And technically God is nothing once you get outside of human imagination, since God doesn't exist anywhere else. Every creationist believes everything came from nothing because creation ex nihilo means everything from nothing. But scientists don't believe that. I know a lot of physicists. The physicists I know, even Lawrence Krauss, author of A Universe from Nothing, says that an absolute nothing cannot even exist. If you had this much nothing, nothing in a box this big, well, that would still be something. That still allows for quantum fluctuations of particles, subatomic particles popping in and out of existence.
So this really makes sense to you?
No, not really. But then I'm not an astrophysicist. Even if I was, I know a few cosmogonists, and they admit that this doesn't make sense to anybody. And that's why I'm not interested in cosmogony, because I don't understand it. Although I have to admit that it is the best model we have, and even if it was wrong, which we don't know that it is, but even if it was, we'd still have to keep using it until we could come up with something else that has even more explanative power or accounts for all of the data even better than our current cosmogony does. I don't care about cosmogony. I study evolution. That I understand well enough to prove it, even to your satisfaction, if you're not afraid of learning forbidden knowledge of evident realities. It doesn't matter how the universe began, or even if there really was a God or not. Either way, in either case, the Bible would still be man-made mythology with no truth in it, and evolution would still be an inescapable fact of population genetics, fossils, and phylogeny. We've learned more about evolution in the last few decades than we have in the last few centuries prior. 100 years ago, there were a lot of things we didn't yet understand that we do now. And 100 years before that was even worse, because there was no divine wisdom to guide us. So we didn't know anything unless we figured it out for ourselves. And all our discoveries, virtually everything we learned about the history or origins of anything, continue to disprove the fables in the Bible. And I don't think anybody's still going to believe in those fables 100 years from now. At least, I hope we'll all know better by then.